Jack cursed under his breath as he peered out the grimy window of his garage. The snow was really coming down now, fat flakes swirling in the dim glow of the streetlights. He should have closed up and headed home hours ago, but that old clunker in the back still needed some work. And now this, a figure stumbling through the blizzard, barely visible in the swirling white. Curiosity got the better of him, and Jack hurried outside, hugging his coat tight. As he approached the shivering form, he was shocked to recognize the young girl from the diner down the street, the one with the wild eyes and tangled hair who always kept to herself. What was she doing out in this storm? "Hey there, darlin'," Jack called out, trying to keep his voice gentle. "You lost? This ain't no night to be wandering around out here." The girl jerked her head up, eyes wide with fear. She couldn't have been more than 15, and she was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. Without a word, she lunged forward and clung to Jack's arm, as if he were the only solid thing in a world gone mad. Jack knew he should just take her to the police station, but something about the girl's desperation tugged at his heart. With a heavy sigh, he guided her inside the warm, cluttered garage. "Come on, let's get you dried off before you freeze to death out there." He bustled around, grabbing an old blanket and heating up some leftover coffee. The girl watched him warily, not saying a word. As Jack handed her the steaming mug, their eyes met, and he was shocked by the raw terror he saw there. This wasn't just a runaway looking for shelter. Something had her truly terrified. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Ember." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Well, Ember, you sure picked one heck of a night to be out on your own. You want to tell me what happened?" Ember shook her head, huddling deeper into the blanket. Jack frowned, wondering if he should call the cops after all, when the rumble of heavy engines outside made them both freeze. Jack peered cautiously through the window, his heart sinking as he recognized the black leather jackets and thunderous Harleys of the local Hells Angels chapter. What the hell were they doing here, in the middle of a blizzard? A chill ran down his spine as he realized they must be looking for Ember. Quickly, he ushered the girl deeper into the garage, hitting her behind a stack of tires. "Stay quiet and don't move," he whispered urgently. "I'm gonna try to run him off." Straightening his shoulders, Jack strode outside to face the bikers as they dismounted their bikes, their heavy boots crunching in the snow. The leader, a massive man with a spiderweb tattoo crawling up his neck, fixed Jack with a cold, piercing stare. "Evening, gentlemen," Jack said, hoping his voice didn't betray his nerves. "What can I do for you?" "We're looking for someone," the biker growled. "A little girl."
"You seen her?" Jack's mind raced, trying to think of a plausible lie. "Nah, ain't no little girls been through here. Just me and my wrenches working late." The biker's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" Before Jack could respond, a movement behind him made the biker's head snap up. Ember had emerged from her hiding place, her eyes wide with terror. Jack's heart sank as the leader's face split into a cruel grin. "Well, well, well, if it ain't our little runaway." He gestured to his men, who surged forward menacingly. "Time to come home, darling." Ember shrank back, clutching the blanket around her. "No, please." Jack stepped in front of her, holding up his hands. "Hold on a minute, fellas. The girl's obviously scared. Why don't you just let me—" His words were cut off as the biker's fist slammed into his jaw, sending him reeling. Jack tasted blood as he crashed to the ground, stars exploding in his vision. "Stay out of this, grease monkey," the biker snarled. "This ain't your business." Jack struggled to his knees, his head pounding. He had to do something, had to protect Ember. But these were Hell's Angels. He knew he couldn't take them all on. Still, he couldn't just stand by and let them drag that terrified girl away. Luckily, he didn't have to. A sudden commotion behind the bikers made them whirl around, and Jack's eyes widened as he saw a police car pulling up, its lights flashing. The bikers cursed and scrambled back to their bikes, but the cops were already spilling out, batons drawn. "Freeze! Hands up!" one of the officers shouted. The bikers hesitated for a moment, then peeled out in a spray of snow and gravel, roaring away into the night. Jack sagged with relief, his adrenaline crashing. The cops approached him cautiously. "You all right, sir?" Jack nodded, wincing as he prodded his tender jaw. "Yeah, I'm fine. That girl, though, she needs help." He turned only to find Ember had vanished. Panic gripped him as he scanned the darkness, but there was no sign of her. She'd slipped away, back into the blizzard, and he had a sinking feeling she was heading straight back to the Hells Angels. The cops exchanged a troubled look. "We'll put out an APB. Hopefully we can find her before those bikers do." Jack nodded numbly, his mind racing. He should have done more, should have tried harder to protect her. But what could he have done against those hardened criminals? He cursed himself for his weakness, knowing that Ember was now in grave danger.
The Hells Angels were notorious for their ruthlessness, and if they caught her, who knew what they would do? As the police drove off, sirens fading into the storm, Jack felt a deep, unsettling dread settle in his bones. He just witnessed the beginning of something horrific, he was sure of it, and he had a sinking feeling that his own family could be caught in the crossfire. Jack watched helplessly as the police car sped away, its sirens fading into the howling blizzard. Ember had vanished, disappearing back into the storm, and he couldn't shake the sinking feeling that she was headed straight for the clutches of the Hells Angels. He hurried back inside the garage, his mind racing. He should have done more, should have tried harder to protect her, but what could he have done against those hardened criminals? He cursed himself for his weakness, knowing that Ember was now in grave danger. As he paced the cluttered space, a sudden movement in the shadows made him freeze. His heart pounded as a figure emerged, stepping into the dim light. It was Ember, her wild eyes shining with fear. "Ember." Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here? I thought you—" The girl cut him off, her voice desperate. "Please, you have to help me. They're coming back. I know it. I can't go with them. I just can't." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "Who's coming back, darling?" "The Hells Angels." Ember nodded, her whole body trembling. "Yes, they're looking for me. I managed to slip away, but they won't stop until they find me. You have to hide me, please." Jack hesitated, his mind racing. He knew the right thing to do would be to call the police, to let them handle this. But the raw terror in Ember's eyes tugged at his heart, and he couldn't bring himself to turn her over to the authorities. All right, calm down," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can hide out here for now, but we need to figure out what to do next." Ember let out a shaky breath of relief. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do if—" Suddenly, the roar of engines outside made them both freeze. Jack's blood ran cold as he recognized the thunderous sound of Harley-Davidsons. The Hells Angels had returned. "Quick, get back in the shadows," Jack whispered urgently, ushering Ember behind the stack of tires where she'd hidden before. "Don't make a sound, you hear?" Ember nodded, her eyes wide with terror. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself, then strode back outside to face the approaching bikers. The leader, the one with the spider-web tattoo, dismounted his bike, his heavy boots crunching in the snow. Well, if it ain't our friend the Grease Monkey," he growled, a menacing grin spreading across his face. "Thought you could hide our little runaway from us, didn't ya?" Jack raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Look, fellas, I don't want any trouble. The girl's scared, that's all. Why don't you just leave her be and—" His words were cut off as the biker's fist slammed into his face, sending him reeling. Jack tasted blood as he crashed to the ground, stars exploding in his vision. "Shut your damn mouth," the biker snarled. "This ain't your business." Jack struggled to his knees, his head bounding. He had to do something, had to protect Ember. But these were Hells Angels. He knew he couldn't take them all on. Still, he couldn't just stand by and let that terrified girl away. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. "That's enough." Jack's head snapped up and his eyes widened in shock, the sight of the newcomer striding towards them. It was Sheriff Randall, the town's gruff but respected law enforcement officer. The Hells Angels froze, their expressions shifting from bravado to uncertainty. "Sheriff," the leader said, his voice laced with a hint of unease. "Fancy seeing you out here in this weather." Randall fixed the biker with a cold stare. "I believe the girl is under my protection now. I suggest you and your men turn around and leave before I have to arrest you for trespassing and assault." The biker's face contorted with rage, but there was a glimmer of fear in his eyes. "This ain't over, Sheriff," he growled, before gesturing to his men and stalking back to their bikes. As the rumble of Harley engines faded into the distance, Randall approached Jack, offering him a hand up. "You all right, son?" Jack nodded, wincing as he prodded his tender jaw. "Yeah, I'm fine. But Ember—" "I know," Randall interrupted, his expression grave. "That girl's been through hell, and those bikers are after her for a reason. Come on, let's get her someplace safe." He gestured for Ember to come out of her hiding place, and the girl emerged, her eyes brimming with gratitude and relief. As she joined them, Jack couldn't help but wonder what dark secret she was carrying and why the Hells Angels were so desperate to get their hands on her. Randall led them to his patrol car, ushering Ember into the back seat. "We're going to my place," he said, his voice low and serious. "I need to make some calls, see what I can find out about the situation." Jack hesitated, his mind racing. "Sheriff, I don't know what's going on here, but I want to help. That girl's in serious trouble, and I can't just—" Randall held up a hand, silencing him. "I understand, son, but this is dangerous business, and I can't have civilians getting mixed up in it. Just go home, get some rest. I'll handle things from here." Jack opened his mouth to protest, but the stern look of Randall's face made him think better of it. With a heavy sigh, he nodded and watched as the sheriff's car pulled away, taking Ember to safety. As he made his way back to the garage, Jack felt a growing sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye, and he couldn't help but worry about Ember's fate. What dark secrets was she hiding, and why were the Hells Angels so desperate to get their hands on her? Jack knew he should just let Randall handle it, but something about the girl's sheer terror had gotten under his skin. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing, not when he knew she was in danger. Glancing around the empty garage, Jack made a decision. He was going to find out what was really going on, no matter what it took. Ember's life might depend on it.
Here is a new 1,600-word chapter continuing the story. Jack paced the empty garage, his mind racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Ember and the danger she was in. The Hells Angels were after her for some reason, and Sheriff Randall had taken her to his home to keep her safe. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than anyone realized. He thought back to the terror in Ember's eyes, the way she had clung to him like he was her only hope. Whatever she was running from, it had her truly terrified. And if the notorious Hells Angels were after her, it had to be something serious. Jack knew he should just let the sheriff handle it. Randall was a tough, experienced lawman. He could protect Ember and get to the bottom of this. But Jack couldn't shake the nagging sense that something wasn't right. What if Randall wasn't telling them the whole story? What if Ember wasn't even more danger than they realized? With a heavy sigh, Jack grabbed his keys and headed for his old pickup truck. He had to at least try to help, even if it was just checking in on Ember and making sure she was safe. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing, not when an innocent girl's life was at stake. As he drove through the swirling snow, Jack's mind raced with questions. What dark secrets was Ember hiding? Why were the Hells Angels so desperate to find her? And what was the sheriff's connection to all of this? When he pulled up to Randall's house, the lights were on, but the place seemed quiet. Jack approached the front door cautiously, his heart pounding. He knocked, but there was no answer. Slowly, he tried the handle. To his surprise, the door swung open. "Sheriff?" Jack called out, stepping inside. "Ember? You here?" Silence. Jack's unease grew as he moved further into the house, his gaze sweeping over the cluttered living room. Something didn't feel right. Suddenly, a muffled sound from the kitchen made him freeze. Carefully, he approached the doorway, peering inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Sheriff Randall was sprawled on the floor, unmoving. And standing over him, a gun clutched in her shaking hands, was Ember. "Ember?" Jack gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. What happened?" The girl's head snapped up, her wild eyes brimming with tears. I didn't mean to, I swear. He was going to hand me over to them. I had to stop him." Jack's mind reeled as he processed her words. Randall, the respected lawman, had betrayed them, and Ember had shot him in self-defense? It was all too much to comprehend. "Ember, what are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "Who was he going to hand you over to?" Ember let out a shaky breath. "The Hells Angels. He was working with them. He was going to give me back to them." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. But why? Why would the sheriff be involved with those criminals? Ember shook her head, her grip on the gun tightening.
I don't know. All I know is that they want me back, and he was going to let them take me. I couldn't let that happen. I just couldn't." Suddenly, the sound of sirens in the distance made them both freeze. Amber's eyes went wide with panic. "Oh God, the cops are coming. They're going to think I murdered him. I can't go to prison. I just can't." Jack's mind raced. He had to get Ember out of here, away from the scene of the crime. But where could they go? The Hells Angels were still out there, hunting for her, and now the police were on their way. "Ember, listen to me," he said urgently, stepping closer to her. "You need to get out of here, now. I'll take the blame. Say I shot the sheriff. You just need to run, get as far away from here as you can." Ember stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. But you'll go to prison. I can't let you do that. I can't." Jack shook his head, his expression grim. "It's the only way, darling. The Hells Angels are after you, and the cops are coming. You gotta get out of here before it's too late." Ember hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her face etched with guilt and fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I won't forget this." With that, she turned and ran, disappearing into the snowy night. Jack watched her go, his heart pounding. He knew he was risking everything, but he couldn't let Ember fall into the hands of those ruthless bikers. Whatever secret she was carrying, they had to be worth protecting. As the sirens grew closer, Jack steeled himself, gripping the gun in his shaking hands. He had to make this convincing, had to make the cops believe he was the one who shot Randall. It was the only way to buy Ember some time. When the police finally burst through the door, Jack raised the gun, his expression wild. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "I'll shoot, I swear." The officers froze, their weapons trained on him. "Drop the gun, sir," one of them yelled. "Put your hands up." Jack hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered the gun to the floor, his hands shaking. I didn't mean to kill him," he said, his voice cracking. "It was an accident, I swear." The cops moved in, cuffing him and roughly hauling him to his feet. As they dragged him outside, Jack caught a glimpse of the sheriff's prone form, and a wave of guilt and dread washed over him. What had he done? He'd just thrown his own life away to protect a girl he barely knew. But something told him that Ember was worth the sacrifice. Whatever she was running from, it had to be something truly terrifying. As the police car sped away, sirens blaring, Jack couldn't help but wonder what the future held. He'd taken the blame for Randall's shooting, but would that really save Ember? The Hells Angels were still out there, and they were sure to come after her again.
And what if the cops eventually realized the truth? That Ember was the real shooter, not him? Jack's stomach twisted with worry. He'd done what he thought was right, but now he was facing the consequences. Would Ember even make it out of this alive? And what would happen to him, rotting in a prison cell while a ruthless gang hunted the girl he tried to protect? The uncertainty weighed on him as the car sped through the snowy streets. He knew he'd made a risky, perhaps even foolish choice. But something about Ember's raw terror, the way she had clung to him like he was her last hope, had struck a chord deep within him. He couldn't just stand by and let her fall into the clutches of those brutal bikers. As the police station came into view, Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to keep Ember safe, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The car came to a stop, and the officers dragged him inside, booking him and processing his arrest. Through it all, Jack remained silent, his mind racing. He knew the road ahead would be a long and difficult one, but he was determined to see it through. As he was led to a holding cell, Jack couldn't help but wonder what had become of Ember. Was she safe, or had the Hells Angels already found her? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. He had to make sure the cops believed his story, that he was the one who shot Randall. It was the only way to buy Ember some time, to give her a chance to escape. And no matter what happened to him, he knew he had to do everything in his power to protect her. As the cell door clanged shut behind him, Jack sat down on the hard bench, his gaze fixed on the barred window. The snow was still falling, the blizzard raging on. But somewhere out there, Ember was fighting for her life, and he would be damned if he let her face that battle alone. With a deep breath, Jack steeled himself for the fight of his life. He may be behind bars, but his heart and his mind were still out there, with the girl who needed him, and he wasn't about to let her down, no matter the cost. Here is a new 1,600-word chapter continuing the story with a shocking plot twist. Jack sat in the cold, dimly lit cell, his mind racing. He'd taken the fall for Ember, claiming he was the one who shot Sheriff Randall, but now he had no idea what had become of the girl. Had she managed to escape the Hells Angels, or were they still hunting her down? The uncertainty gnawed at him. He'd risked everything to protect Ember, but what if it had all been for nothing? What if she was still out there, alone and terrified, with those ruthless bikers closing in? Jack let out a frustrated sigh and raked a hand through his hair. He had to find a way to get word to her,
to make sure she was safe.
But with him locked up in the cell, how could he possibly help her? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside made him look up. The door to his cell swung open, and Jack's heart sank as he recognized the imposing figure of the Hells Angels leader, the one with the spiderweb tattoo. "Well, well, if it ain't our friend the Grease Monkey," the biker growled, a menacing grin spreading across his face. "Didn't expect to see you here." Jack's throat went dry as the man stepped into the cell, flanked by two of his goons. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The biker chuckled darkly. "Oh, I think you know what I want. Where's the girl, Jack? Where's Ember?" Jack's heart hammered in his chest. "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, feigning ignorance. The biker's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb with me, boy. We know you were trying to protect her. And now, thanks to your little stunt, the cops think you shot the sheriff." He let out a harsh laugh. "Ain't that ironic?" Jack's mind raced, trying to figure out how these bikers had found out about his involvement. Had they been watching the house, waiting for their chance to strike? Or did they have someone on the inside, feeding them information? "Look, I don't know where Ember is," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "She ran off, and I haven't seen her since. I'm just as much in the dark as you are." The biker's expression darkened. "That's so." He gestured to his men, who moved closer, their hands flexing menacingly. "Well, maybe a little persuasion will jog your memory." Jack's heart sank as the goons advanced, their fists clenched. He knew these men were capable of unspeakable brutality, and he braced himself for the pain that was about to come. But just as the first blow landed, a commotion outside the cell made everyone freeze. The sound of shouting and the thud of running footsteps grew closer, and suddenly the door burst open again. Jack's eyes widened in shock as Sheriff Randall stumbled into the cell, his face pale and his uniform stained with blood. The Hells Angels leader and his men recoiled, their expressions a mix of surprise and fear. "What the?" the biker growled, but Randall cut him off. "Get out of here, you bastards!" the sheriff shouted, his voice hoarse. "This is my town, and I won't have your kind terrorizing it." The biker's jaw tightened, and for a moment Jack thought the man might attack the wounded lawman. But then, to his surprise, the biker backed down, gesturing to his men. "This ain't over," he snarled, fixing Jack with a menacing glare. "We'll be back for the girl, and when we find her, you can bet we'll make you both pay." With that, the bikers retreated, their heavy boots echoing down the hallway. Jack stared at Randall, his mind reeling. "Sheriff, what the hell is going on?" he demanded. "I thought you were—" "Dead?" Randall interrupted, wincing as he pressed a hand to his side.
Yeah, well, I'm a hard man to kill, it seems.
He stumbled over to the cell's lone cot, sinking down with a groan. Jack watched him, torn between relief and confusion. But Ember, she said you were working with the Hells Angels," he stammered, "that you were going to hand her over to them." Randall let out a weary sigh. "It's a long story, son, one I'm still trying to figure out myself." He paused, his gaze fixing on Jack with a newfound respect. "You know, you really stepped up to protect that girl. That was a brave thing you did, taking the blame like that." Jack shook his head, his brow furrowed. "I don't understand. If you weren't working with the Hells Angels, then why did Ember think you were?" Randall's expression darkened. "Because she was telling the truth. Or at least, she thought she was." Jack stared at him, bewildered. "What are you saying?" The sheriff ran a hand through his graying hair, his face etched with fatigue. "The Hells Angels, they've got their hooks in this town, deeper than anyone knows, including me." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean you're working for them?" Randall shook his head quickly. No, it's not like that. I've been trying to take them down for years, but they've got too much power, too many people in their pocket." He let out a weary sigh, including the former sheriff. Jack's eyes widened as the realization hit him. "Wait, you mean the Hells Angels killed the old sheriff and put you in his place?" Randall nodded grimly. "That's right. They needed someone they could control, someone who would look the other way while they expanded their operations in this town." His expression darkened. "And I let them. I was too scared, too damn weak to stand up to them." Jack stared at him, stunned. All this time, The Hells Angels had been running the show, with Randall as their unwitting puppet. No wonder Ember had been so terrified. She must have stumbled onto their dark secrets, and now they were hunting her down. "But why Ember?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does she have to do with all this?" Randall shook his head. "I wish I knew, son. All I know is that the Hells Angels are desperate to get their hands on her, and they'll stop at nothing to make that happen." Jack felt a cold knot of dread form in the pit of his stomach. "Then we have to find her. Before they do, we have to—" He broke off as a sudden realization hit him, a sickening feeling of betrayal washing over him. Wait a minute. If the Hells Angels have been running this town, then that means you knew they were after Ember, didn't you? Randall averted his gaze, his expression guilty. I suspected as much, but I didn't know the full extent of their plans, I swear. I thought I could protect her, keep her safe from them. Jack felt a surge of anger. Protect her by handing her over to them. Randall shook his head vehemently.
No, that's not what I was doing. I was trying to get her to a safe place, somewhere the Hells Angels couldn't find her. But then you showed up, and Ember panicked, and he trailed off, his face etched with regret. Jack stared at him, his mind racing. He wanted to be angry, to lash out at the sheriff for his cowardice and complicity, but deep down he could see the genuine remorse in Randall's eyes. The man had been caught in an impossible situation, forced to choose between his town and his own safety. So what happens now? Jack asked, his voice low. The Hells Angels are still out there, and they're not going to stop until they find Ember. Randall winced, pressing a hand to his wounded side. I don't know, son. All I know is that we have to find that girl, fast, before the Hells Angels do. Jack nodded, his expression grim. Then let's get to work. I'm not about to let those bastards get their hands on her, not after everything. Randall managed a weary smile. That's the spirit, Jack. We may be the underdogs in this fight, but I'll be damned if I let those bikers run roughshod over my town any longer. As the two men began to plan their next move, Jack couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was sure to be treacherous, but with Randall on his side, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance of protecting Ember and taking down the Hells Angels for good. But the weight of the uncertainty still pressed down on him. Where was Ember now? Was she even still alive? And what other dark secrets were lurking in the shadows of this seemingly quiet town? Jack steeled himself, knowing that the battle had only just begun. Whatever lay ahead, he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Ember's life depended on it. Here is a new 1,600-word chapter with a shocking plot twist. Jack could barely believe what he was hearing. Sheriff Randall, the pillar of the community, was in cahoots with the Hells Angels. It was all too much to wrap his head around. As Randall explained the sordid details, how the biker gang had infiltrated the town, how they had muscled out the previous sheriff, Jack felt a growing sense of unease. This went deeper than he ever could have imagined. So you're telling me the Hells Angels have been running this town from the shadows with you as their puppet? Jack asked, trying to keep the accusation out of his voice. Randall nodded wearily. That's right. I was a fool, thinking I could play both sides, keep the town safe while bowing to their demands. But I was in over my head, and innocent people ended up paying the price. Jack's jaw tightened. Like Ember, you mean. They want her for some reason, and you were going to hand her over to them. The sheriff winced. I wasn't going to hand her over, not really. I was trying to get her to a safe place, somewhere the Hells Angels couldn't find her. But then you showed up, and Ember panicked. He trailed off, his expression etched with regret.
Jack shook his head in disbelief. So what? You were just going to let them think I killed you? Was that part of your big plan to protect Ember? Randall sighed heavily. I didn't have much of a plan, to be honest. I was making it up as I went along, trying to keep one step ahead of those bastards. When you showed up, I saw an opportunity. If they thought you had shot me, maybe it would buy Ember some time to escape. Jack stared at him, his mind reeling. And you were just going to let me take the fall? Rot in prison while the Hells Angels hunted down that poor girl? The sheriff's gaze dropped. I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate, Jack. I couldn't let them get their hands on Ember, not after everything she's been through. Jack felt a surge of anger. Everything she's been through? What the hell does that even mean? What are you not telling me, Randall? The older man hesitated, then shook his head. I I don't know all the details. All I know is that the Hells Angels are obsessed with finding Ember, and they'll stop at nothing to get her back. Jack's eyes narrowed. Back? You mean she was with them before? Randall nodded reluctantly. From what I can gather, yes. Ember she was one of them, at least for a time, but she managed to escape, and now they want her back. Jack felt sick to his stomach. The idea of that terrified, vulnerable girl being mixed up with the Hells Angels made his blood boil. No wonder she was so desperate to get away from them. So what? They just want their little runaway back? He spat. Or is there more to it than that? Randall shook his head. I wish I knew, son. All I can tell you is that the Hells Angels have been pouring resources into finding Ember, more than I've ever seen them do for anyone else. There's something about her, something important, that they can't afford to lose. Jack's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. And you were just going to let them take her, weren't you? Even if it meant sacrificing me in the process? The sheriff's expression crumpled with guilt. I didn't have a choice, Jack. Those bikers, they have too much power, too much reach. If I stood in their way, they'd destroy me, and then who would be left to protect this town? Jack let out a humorless laugh. Protect the town by handing over a terrified girl to a bunch of ruthless criminals? Randall flinched, his gaze dropping. I know. It was a cowardly, selfish decision, but I was afraid, Jack. Afraid for my life, afraid for everything I've worked for. I thought I could play both sides, keep the town safe while appeasing the Hells Angels. But I was a fool, and now innocent people are paying the price. Jack stared at the older man, stunned by the weight of his confession. Randall had been complicit in the Hells Angels' dark schemes, all in the name of self-preservation, and Ember, poor Ember, had been caught in the crossfire. So what now? Jack asked, his voice low.
The Hells Angels are still out there, looking for her. And you've got no choice but to keep helping them, do you? Randall nodded grimly. I'm afraid so. If I don't cooperate, they'll know something's up. They'll come after me, and they'll come after you, and anyone else who gets in their way. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. And Ember? What happens to her? The sheriff's expression darkened. I don't know, son, but if the Hells Angels get their hands on her, I can't even imagine what they might do. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy with dread. Jack's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. Ember's life hung in the balance, and he couldn't just sit back and let the Hells Angels have their way. Suddenly, a muffled sound from the hallway outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, were approaching the cell. Randall's eyes went wide with fear. It's them, he whispered urgently. The Hells Angels, they're here. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as the cell door swung open, revealing the towering figure of the gang's leader, his spiderweb tattoo stark against his weathered skin. Well, if it isn't the good sheriff, the biker drawled, a menacing grin spreading across his face. And our old friend the Grease Monkey. Fancy seeing you two together. Randall straightened his shoulders, trying to appear confident. What do you want, Brick? The biker, Brick, chuckled darkly. Oh, I think you know what I want, Randall. The girl. Where is she? Randall's expression hardened. I don't know where Ember is. She got away from me, same as she got away from you. Brick's eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb with me, old man. We know you've been hiding her, trying to keep her from us. He took a step closer, his gaze fixing on Jack. And we know you've been helping him, so where is she? Jack felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to back down. I told you, I don't know where she is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. He met Brick's stare defiantly. You're not getting your hands on that girl, not if I can help it. Brick's lips curled into a cruel smile. Is that so? He turned to Randall, his expression darkening. Well, if you won't tell us where the girl is, maybe we'll just have to persuade the sheriff instead. Before either Jack or Randall could react, Brick's fist slammed into the sheriff's face, sending him crashing to the floor. Randall let out a cry of pain, blood gushing from his nose. Jack lunged forward, but the biker's two goons were on him in an instant, their hands like vices around his arms. He struggled futilely, his heart pounded. Brick loomed over the fallen sheriff, his expression twisted with menace. You've been a thorn in our side for too long, Randall. Time to teach you a lesson.
Jack watched in horror as Brick drew a gun, leveling it at the sheriff's head. "No!" he cried out, but his voice was drowned by the deafening roar of the gunshot.
Randall's body jerked, then went still, his lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. Jack felt sick, his stomach twisting with a mixture of grief and rage. Brick turned to him, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "There, that should make things a little simpler. Now, where's the girl?" Jack stared at him, his mind reeling. Ember was out there, alone and terrified, and now Randall was dead, murdered right in front of him. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he refused to give in to the despair. "I don't know," he growled, his voice barely above a whisper. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. You're not getting your hands on Ember, not if I have to die to stop you." Brick's expression darkened, and he raised the gun, leveling it at Jack's head. "Have it your way, then." Jack closed his eyes, bracing himself for the end. But just as Brick's finger tightened on the trigger, a sudden commotion outside the cell made them both freeze. Shouts and the sound of scuffling feet echoed down the hallway, and Jack's heart leapt as he recognized a familiar voice. Ember's. The girl burst into the cell, her eyes wild and her hair disheveled. "Stop," she cried, her voice trembling. "Don't hurt him, please." Brick stared at her, his expression a mix of surprise and triumph. "Well, well, look who decided to join the party." He gestured to his men, who released their grip on Jack, allowing him to stumble forward. Ember rushed to his side, her gaze darting between him and the fallen sheriff, her face etched with horror. "Ember," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse. "What have you done?" The girl's eyes brimmed with tears. I couldn't let them hurt you. I had to come back. I had to try to stop them." Brick let out a booming laugh. "Well, ain't that sweet? Looks like our little runaway has a soft spot for the grease monkey." He stepped closer, his gun trained on Ember. "But you know, this changes things. Now that you're back, we can finally finish what we started." Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true extent of the Hells Angels' plans. They had been after Ember all along, for some dark purpose that he couldn't even begin to fathom. And now, with Randall gone and Ember in their clutches, there was nothing to stop them from taking her and doing God knows what. As Brick gestured to his men, Jack knew he had to act. But with the gun pointed at Ember, he was paralyzed, his mind racing to find a way out of this nightmare. The future was uncertain, the outcome unknown. All he knew was that he had to protect Ember, no matter the cost, even if it meant risking everything he had left. Here is the final 1,600-word chapter to conclude the story. Jack's heart pounded as he watched Brick and his goons close in on Ember. He had to do something, had to find a way to get her out of this nightmare. But with that gun pointed at her, he was frozen, his mind racing to find a solution. Suddenly, a plan began to form.
It was crazy and incredibly risky, but it might just be their only chance. "Ember," he said quietly, his gaze locked on the girl. "I need you to trust me, okay? No matter what happens, I need you to run and don't look back." Ember's eyes went wide with fear. "What? No, I can't leave you." "You have to," Jack cut her off, his voice low and urgent. "This is the only way. I'll hold them off, give you a chance to get away." Ember shook her head frantically. "But they'll kill you. I can't let you." "Ember, listen to me," Jack interjected, his expression grave. "I need you to be strong, all right? Get out of here and don't stop running until you're somewhere safe. Can you do that for me?" Ember stared at him, her eyes brimming with tears. After a moment, she nodded slowly, her jaw set with determination. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile, then turned to face Brick, his expression hardening. "All right, you bastard," he growled. "If you want Ember, you're gonna have to go through me first." Brick let out a harsh laugh. "Is that so?" He leveled the gun at Jack's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, Ember suddenly lunged forward, slamming into the biker with all her might. Brick staggered, the gun flying from his grasp, and Jack seized the opportunity, barreling into the two goons and knocking them off their feet. "Run, Ember," he yelled, shoving the girl toward the cell door. "Get out of here, now."
Ember hesitated for a split second, her expression torn, then turned and sprinted out of the cell, disappearing down the hallway. Jack watched her go, relief and fear warring in his chest. Brick let out a roar of rage, his face contorted with fury. "After her, you idiots!" he bellowed, shoving his men toward the door. As the bikers rushed out, Jack steeled himself, knowing he was about to face the fight of his life. But he didn't care. All that mattered was giving Ember a fighting chance. The two goons charged at him, their fists swinging, and Jack met them head-on, his years of scrappy street fighting kicking in. He dodged their blows, landing punches of his own, his adrenaline surging. Out in the hallway, he could hear the sound of shouting and the pounding of heavy boots as the bikers gave chase. Ember was running for her life, and he had to buy her as much time as he could. Brick re-entered the cell, his eyes burning with murderous intent. "You're gonna pay for that, you son of a bitch," he growled, advancing on Jack. Jack braced himself, his muscles tense. "Bring it on, you bastard," he spat. The biker's fist slammed into his face, sending him reeling, and Jack felt a flash of pain. But he refused to back down, returning the blow with all his strength. Brick staggered, his lips split and bleeding, and Jack seized the opportunity, driving his knee into the biker's gut. As Brick doubled over, gasping for breath, Jack glanced toward the open cell door, his heart sinking.
The goons had returned, their expressions triumphant. "We lost her," one of them growled. "That little bitch is long gone." Brick let out a roar of rage, his face twisting with fury. "Then find her," he bellowed. "Tear this goddamn town apart if you have to, but bring me that girl." The goons rushed out, their heavy boots pounding against the concrete floor. Jack watched them go, his mind racing. Ember was safe, for now, but the Hells Angels would be relentless in their pursuit. Brick turned to him, his eyes glinting with malice. "Looks like it's just you and me, Grease Monkey," he growled. "Time to finish what we started." Jack braced himself, knowing that his only chance was to hold out long enough for Ember to get as far away as possible. He had to do whatever it took to keep those bikers off her trail. The brawl that followed was brutal, a savage exchange of blows that left them both battered and bloodied. Jack fought with a desperate fury, driven by the knowledge that Ember's life hung in the balance. But as the minutes ticked by, he could feel his strength starting to wane. Brick was a relentless, savage fighter, and Jack knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Just as he was starting to think he might not make it, a sudden commotion outside the cell made them both freeze. The sound of sirens, growing louder by the second, echoed through the hall. Brick's eyes went wide with panic. "Shit, the cops!" He glanced at Jack, his expression torn. "This ain't over, Grease Monkey. I'll be back for that girl. You can count on it." With that, he turned and fled, disappearing down the hallway. Jack sagged against the wall, his body aching, but a surge of relief washed over him. Ember was safe, at least for now. As the police swarmed the station, Jack was hauled out of the cell, his hands cuffed behind his back. But he didn't care. All that mattered was that Ember had escaped the Hells Angels' clutches. In the chaos, he managed to catch a glimpse of Randall's body being wheeled out on a stretcher, a grim-faced coroner at the helm. Jack felt a pang of sorrow, knowing that the sheriff had paid the ultimate price for his mistakes. But as he was shoved into the back of a squad car, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Ember was out there, somewhere, and he knew he had to find a way to get to her, to make sure she was safe. The ride to the station was a blur, and before long, Jack found himself facing a stern-faced detective, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "All right, son, start talking," the detective growled. "What the hell happened back there?" Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself. "It's a long story, officer, but the short version is, I was trying to protect a girl from a gang of ruthless criminals." The detective's brow furrowed. "A girl, huh? And what does she have to do with the Hells Angels?" Jack shook his head. "I wish I knew. All I know is, they're after her, and they'll stop at nothing to get their hands on her."
The detective studied him for a long moment, then let out a sigh. "Well, son, I can't say I understand all the details, but from what I've seen, it seems like you were trying to do the right thing, even if you went about it the wrong way." Jack felt a glimmer of hope. "Does that mean you'll help me?" The detective held up a hand. "Hold on now, I didn't say that. You still shot a man, even if it was in self-defense. But I'll see what I can do to look into this Hells Angels business, see if there's any truth to what you're saying." Jack nodded gratefully. "Thank you, officer. Ember, she's in real danger. I have to find her, make sure she's safe." The detective's expression softened. "I hear you, son, and I'll do my best to help. But you've got to cooperate, all right? No more heroics, you hear?" Jack managed a weary smile. "Yes, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." As the detective left, Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Ember was out there, alone and scared, and the Hells Angels were hunting her down. He had to find a way to get to her, to protect her from those ruthless bastards. But with him locked up, what could he possibly do? He cursed himself for his recklessness, for putting himself in this position. If only he had found a better way, a smarter way, to keep Ember safe. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him, and he sat up straighter, a spark of determination igniting in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he could use his situation to his advantage. If he played his cards right, he might just be able to get the cops on his side, to turn them into unlikely allies in the fight against the Hells Angels. It was a long shot, he knew, but it was all he had, and for Ember's sake, he had to try. With a deep breath, Jack steeled himself, ready to face whatever lay ahead. He'd come too far to give up now. Ember was counting on him, and he wasn't about to let her down. As the detective returned, Jack looked up, his expression resolute. "All right, officer, let's talk. I'm ready to tell you everything I know." The detective studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, son, I'm listening." Jack took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice low and urgent. This was his chance to turn the tables, to use the system to his advantage, and protect the girl he had risked everything to save. He wasn't going to let the Hells Angels win, not without a fight. Ember's life depended on it, and he was damn well going to do whatever it took to keep her safe. The road ahead would be treacherous, filled with uncertainty and danger. But as Jack laid out his plan, a newfound determination burned in his chest. He wasn't going to let Ember face those ruthless bikers alone, not if he had anything to say about it. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He was in this for the long haul, and he would stop at nothing to bring Ember home, to keep her safe from the darkness that had consumed this town.
The future was uncertain, but Jack was ready to face it head-on. For Ember's sake, and for the sake of the town he had grown to love, he would fight with everything he had. And as the detective listened, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue, Jack knew that he might just have a chance. It was a long shot, but it was the only hope he had. With a deep breath, he launched into the details of his plan, his voice steady and resolute. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The battle was far from over, but Jack was ready to take the fight to the Hells Angels, and this time he wasn't going to let them win.